Welcome back to my channel. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. It's great to have you here on a morning softened by mist and touched by the rhythm of the tide. There stood a young traveler on the British coastline. The sea stretched wide and endless, as though it wished to swallow every thought of the world beyond. The air was cool, yet not harsh, and the waves rolled in with a steady pulse, like a heartbeat guiding the earth itself. It was here, upon this coastline, that two souls first crossed paths. Neither had planned for such a meeting. It was as if the land itself had decided to draw them together. The coastline, rugged yet tender, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and in that glow the beginning of something unspoken revealed itself. The young man walked with a sense of quiet wonder, his eyes tracing the jagged cliffs, the chalky whites against the dark sea, while she stood not far away, gazing across the water, her posture both delicate and strong. When their eyes met, it felt less like chance and more like recognition. The waves whispered between them, and though no words had yet been spoken, there was already a conversation alive in the silence. At last he spoke. His voice, tinged with the soft cadence of a British accent, fell upon her ears with an elegance she had not expected. The sound was music against the hum of the sea, carrying with it a charm that belonged both to him and to the land around them. In that accent, even the simplest word felt alive, buzzing with character, glowing with depth. She listened not only to his meaning, but to the rhythm, the way his voice bent gently over each syllable. And as she answered, their words formed a bridge, not unlike the ancient causeways that dot this coastline, built stone by stone, yet unshaken by time. They began to walk, side by side, not hurried, but with the ease of those who understand that moments of wonder cannot be rushed. The coastline stretched before them, dotted with blossoms that leaned toward the sea breeze, their fragrance subtle but sweet. Every step felt like a page being turned in a story neither had written but both belonged to. The earth beneath their feet was rugged, yet it held them steady, guiding them forward as if it, too, wished for this meeting to grow into something more. In the distance, the Atlantic murmured in tones both fierce and tender, reminding them that love, like the ocean, is vast and unpredictable, but also deeply generous. The mist, which at first had seemed to veil the day, now softened the edges of the world, wrapping them in a space that felt theirs alone. Words flowed more freely with each step, some light and playful, others carrying weight, and the British accent, with its steady rhythm, lent every phrase a glow of intimacy. It was in this shared walk, in this meeting shaped by chance and tide, that the first spark of affection grew. A coastline, a voice, a single look, such simple things, yet together they opened a door to something endless, and from that very moment love began its quiet work. There are moments when words, though ordinary in their meaning, arrive with such grace that they seem to carry more than sound. They carry feeling, they carry charm, they carry a rhythm that lingers in the air. So it was when he spoke again, his voice clothed in that soft British accent, making even the simplest phrase feel like a gift. The accent itself was no barrier, rather it was a window, revealing not only the beauty of language, but the allure hidden in its tone. She listened closely, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, as if each word, no matter how familiar, had been made new. He spoke of the coastline, of the mist that drifted like a veil across the sea, and of the blossoms that dotted the path where they walked. These words, in any voice, might have passed without much notice, but spoken in that accent, they gained a kind of glow. Coastline, he said, letting the syllables stretch with gentle weight, and she found herself savoring the sound as much as the meaning. Blossoms, he added, and the words seemed to carry not only the image of flowers but the promise of beauty unfolding. Language in his voice was not just a tool, it was an invitation, something delicate yet deeply persuasive. What she felt was not confusion but discovery. Each new term, whether simple or strange, felt like a step into a dance she had long wanted to join. Hexagonal, he murmured, describing the curious stones shaped by old volcanoes, and the word itself seemed to twist and turn upon her tongue as she repeated it, clumsy at first, then lighter, as though it had been waiting for her to claim it. The learning did not weigh heavy upon her. It felt instead like affection, a rhythm between two hearts, where meaning was taught as naturally as a smile, and she, in return, let her own words fall into the air. But each time she spoke, she measured them against his, hearing her voice less as her own and more as part of their shared melody. His laughter at her small stumbles was not cruel, but warm, a sign that mistakes were not failures, but gentle openings for closeness. Even in correction there was kindness, and in kindness there was something that drew her further toward him. The accent was more than sound. It was character, a signature of place and history, yet also a force that bound them in the present. It carried the rugged cliffs, the fertile valleys, the misty slopes within it, as though the land itself spoke through him. For her, each word was not only knowledge but also intimacy. She realized that to learn from him was not only to gather vocabulary, but to share in the quiet power of attraction, where language itself becomes the thread that ties two people closer. And so, in his words, she discovered both the lesson of English and the lesson of the heart. The path led them gently away from the sea and into the woodlands, where the air grew softer and the light shifted, filtered through leaves that glowed with a quiet brilliance. The blossoms along the trail opened like shy companions, delicate yet eager to be noticed, their colors brightening the rugged earth beneath. Each step carried them deeper into a world that seemed untouched by haste, where even silence felt rich, alive with meaning. He slowed his stride to match hers, as though walking together was not a task but a privilege, and she felt the rhythm of his presence beside her as strongly as she felt the ground beneath her feet. The woodland whispered with its own voice. Branches swayed. A bird darted across the path, and somewhere in the distance, water hummed against stones. Yet above this, his words found their place, weaving softly into the air, mingling with the scent of damp soil and blossoms. He spoke of the terrain, of its rugged slopes, of how the land here was as varied as the people who belonged to it. Rugged, he said slowly, letting the weight of the word linger between them. She repeated it, smiling when her tongue stumbled on its firmness, and together they laughed, the woodland echoing their shared joy. The act of learning, which in other moments might have felt like effort, here became a kind of tenderness. Each new word was not just knowledge, but a step closer, like a hand offered in trust. He pointed to the hedgerows, neatly dividing fields in the distance, and she listened, the word settling gently into her memory as if it had always belonged there. Harvested, he explained as they passed a clearing, and the term carried not only meaning but warmth, a reminder that life, like love, has seasons of growth and giving. Her attention drifted at times, not from disinterest, but from wonder. She noticed how the blossoms seemed to glow against the darker earth, how the trees rose like guardians above them, how the entire woodland felt like a stage set not for a lesson, but for their meeting. And yet it was precisely this beauty that gave his words their power. The language was not empty, it was alive, grounded in what they saw, breathed in what they felt. To learn here was to fall into rhythm not only with the words but with him, with the land, with the story they were beginning together. They walked slowly, not fearing the distance ahead, for each moment was enough. Even silence spoke between them, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their steps and the soft glow of blossoms that seemed to watch as witnesses. And when he looked at her, it was as though the entire woodland, with its rugged terrain and endless stretches, conspired to remind her that love and language can grow most deeply when rooted in the same soil. And in that walk, among blossoms and shadows, both learning and affection found their home. The path led them gently away from the sea and into the woodlands, where the air grew softer and the light shifted, filtered through leaves that glowed with a quiet brilliance. The blossoms along the trail opened like shy companions, delicate yet eager to be noticed, their colors brightening the rugged earth beneath. Each step carried them deeper into a world that seemed untouched by haste, where even silence felt rich, alive with meaning. He slowed his stride to match hers, as though walking together was not a task but a privilege, and she felt the rhythm of his presence beside her as strongly as she felt the ground beneath her feet. The woodland whispered with its own voice, branches swayed, a bird darted across the path, and somewhere in the distance, water hummed against stones. Yet above this, his words found their place, weaving softly into the air, mingling with the scent of damp soil and blossoms. He spoke of the terrain, of its rugged slopes, of how the land here was as varied as the people who belonged to it. Rugged, he said slowly, letting the weight of the word linger between them. She repeated it, smiling when her tongue stumbled on its firmness, and together they laughed, the woodland echoing their shared joy. The act of learning, which in other moments might have felt like effort, here became a kind of tenderness. Each new word was not just knowledge, but a step closer, like a hand offered in trust. He pointed to the hedgerows, neatly dividing fields in the distance, and she listened, the word settling gently into her memory as if it had always belonged there. Harvested, he explained as they passed a clearing, and the term carried not only meaning but warmth, a reminder that life, like love, has seasons of growth and giving. Her attention drifted at times not from disinterest but from wonder. She noticed how the blossoms seemed to glow against the darker earth, how the trees rose like guardians above them, how the entire woodland felt like a stage set not for a lesson, but for their meeting. And yet it was precisely this beauty that gave his words their power. The language was not empty, it was alive, grounded in what they saw, breathed in what they felt. To learn here was to fall into rhythm not only with the words but with him, with the land, with the story they were beginning together. They walked slowly, not fearing the distance ahead, for each moment was enough. Even silence spoke between them, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their steps and the soft glow of blossoms that seemed to watch as witnesses. And when he looked at her, it was as though the entire woodland, with its rugged terrain and endless stretches, conspired to remind her that love and language can grow most deeply when rooted in the same soil. And in that walk, among blossoms and shadows, both learning and affection found their home. The breeze from the Atlantic swept across the coastline, carrying with it a voice both gentle and insistent, as though the sea itself wished to speak. It moved through the blossoms they had passed, over the rugged cliffs they had admired, and now circled around them in soft currents of air that seemed alive with hidden meaning. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening, and it felt as though the wind carried whispers not only of the sea, but of words waiting to be learned, words that belonged as much to the land as to the heart. When he spoke, his voice mingled with the wind, carried forward as if nature wished to make certain she heard every syllable. The words did not fall heavy, they floated, drifting into her ears like secrets meant for her alone. He said misty, and she could feel the air itself answering, laying a cool touch upon her skin. He said endless, and the sea stretched before them, vast and unbroken, proving the word true with every wave. Each new term was not simply explained but lived, for the world around them echoed back the meaning in ways no book could ever capture. She found herself repeating the words softly, almost in a whisper, as though she, too, was part of this quiet conversation with the wind. The sound of her own voice seemed different here, lighter, freer, as though the landscape itself encouraged her to try, to speak without fear of mistake. And when her accent faltered, he leaned closer, his correction gentle, spoken not as criticism, but as a kind of guidance that bound them more closely together. The breeze carried his laughter away, but the warmth of it remained, resting between them like a promise. It struck her, then, that language could be more than communication. It could be intimacy. Each word spoken in his British accent carried not only definition but feeling, and the wind seemed to agree, wrapping around them as if to remind her that attraction often grows in the spaces between sound and silence. She realized that to listen to him was not simply to learn. It was to be invited into a rhythm, a harmony where love and knowledge shared the same breath. They paused on a rise where the land met the sea more fiercely, the cliffs bare and unyielding, yet softened by the mist. He looked out across the Atlantic and spoke again, his words steady against the rush of air. She turned toward him, and though the wind stole pieces of his voice, it left enough for her to understand, enough to feel the closeness in every phrase. The words themselves, glowing in their simplicity, seemed to belong to both of them now, as though whispered first by the breeze and then by their hearts. And in that moment she knew the wind had not carried only words, but also the beginnings of love. It is a rare thing when words, so simple in appearance, hold the power to draw two people close. Yet in their shared walk, she found that language itself was becoming the bridge between them. He would offer a word gently spoken, and she would take it into her keeping, repeating it softly, until it felt as though it belonged to her as much as it belonged to him. Each exchange seemed more than a lesson. It was a joining, an act of trust that united them in meaning as well as in feeling. When he spoke the word coastal, pointing to the line where land met sea, she felt it reach beyond geography, as though the very edge of the shore was mirrored in the space between them. She echoed him, her voice tentative but eager, and his smile at her effort was warmer than any correction. It was not simply the word that mattered, but the way it was shared. Diverse, he said next, describing the stretches of woodland and cliffs, and she repeated it, savoring both its sound and the closeness it carried. Vocabulary, she realized, was not just knowledge. It was a bond, one that tightened with every syllable passed between them. The world around them seemed to conspire with their learning. Blossoms glowed softly, as though applauding their exchange. The wind carried away their laughter, but left behind the sense of unity it created. Even the rugged terrain seemed to open paths for them, as though to remind her that words, like love, can soften obstacles and make the journey lighter. And as they walked, she began to notice that each new word was no longer only his to give. Together they were shaping a shared language, one that belonged uniquely to them. She had once thought vocabulary to be a list, something to memorize, yet now it revealed itself as something alive. United, he said quietly, and the word itself settled deep within her, more than a definition, more than a sound. It was the truth of the moment. For just as love binds hearts, words can bind souls, carrying expression across silence, distance, even uncertainty. She felt herself leaning closer, not only to catch his voice, but to show with her presence that she was willing to be joined, willing to let the words shape not only her speech but her affection. It was then she understood that learning a language is not only about mastery, it is about connection. Each word they shared became a thread, weaving them together, until she could no longer separate what she had learned from what she had felt. Love and language had become entwined, each strengthening the other, and she knew this unity would remain long after the walk was over. And so, through words, their hearts found a single voice. The day had begun with mist upon the water and blossoms glowing along the path, yet as it neared its close, what lingered most was not the scenery alone, but the way each moment had woven itself into her memory. The cliffs stood tall, their rugged faces etched by centuries of wind and sea, and she knew she would never forget the sight of them, nor the way they seemed to guard the story of her walk beside him. Each slope they had climbed, softened by mist, carried not only the weight of the land, but also the tender rhythm of his voice. His accent, steady and graceful, had given every word a permanence she had not expected, as if the land and his language had conspired to stay with her. She thought of how he had spoken words like rugged and terrain, each one matched perfectly with what stretched before them. They had not been empty terms written in a book, they had been real, alive, pressed into her heart by the beauty of the world around them. She remembered the laughter when she stumbled upon hexagonal, the patience in his eyes when she tried again, the delight they shared when the sound finally rolled smoothly from her tongue. It was not only vocabulary she carried now, but the memory of how it felt to learn it, with joy, with closeness, with love forming quietly in the spaces between. Every detail became part of that memory. The blossoms glowing against the shadowed earth, the hedgerows marking fields like careful brushstrokes on a canvas, the breeze that carried whispers from the Atlantic, all seemed written within her as firmly as the words themselves. And above all, his voice remained, that tender accent which gave life to even the plainest syllable, making the ordinary unforgettable. It was a sound she knew she would carry with her, not just as an echo, but as a reminder of how deeply words can touch when shared with someone dear. What surprised her most was how lasting the smallest things felt, the way he slowed his steps so hers would not hurry, the way his laughter rose lightly when the wind stole his words, the way silence between them was never empty, but always full of something unspoken. These moments, woven together, became more than a memory of a walk. They became proof that learning and love share the same gift. They stay. What is once felt deeply cannot easily be forgotten. As she turned once more to the cliffs, rising strong against the horizon, she knew the land would remain long after they left it, just as the words and the feelings born that day would remain within her. Some memories fade, blurred by time, but others endure, carved into the heart as firmly as stone against the sea. And so, like love, the memory of this learning was destined never to be forgotten. Thank you for walking with me through this journey of words, love, and nature's beauty. If you felt the whispers of the wind and the glow of new vocabulary stay with you, let it be your lasting memory. I hope these stories touched your heart as much as they strengthened your English. So don't forget to like this video if it inspired you, and subscribe for more stories told in a British accent. Together, let's keep learning, keep loving language, and keep walking new paths side by side.